in this like a split second, like it just felt like everything just kind of glazed over. And I'm just like looking into something that's just completely 2D and just doesn't feel like life to me. It was looking through like a fishbowl or just something that just wasn't real. Like I would look at my hands and it just felt like they were attached to like somebody else. Like I remember saying that to my mom. And that was the one thing where she was like, okay, what is going on? Because I was like, my hands don't look like my hands. And she's like, what does that mean? And I was like, well, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. They just don't look like my hands. There is a song by Phoebe Bridgers, and it's called That Funny Feeling. But there's this one part that says, Googling derealization, hating what you find. And I Googled that up again, and I was like, oh my God, where's my personality? I have no emotions. I felt like a genuine robot where it was just like cut off from every emotion, and I was just there living life. And I'm like, how do people do this? It was kind of set me back and like, what is the point? Horrible, obviously, to deal with that. But then on top of like the depersonalization, derealization kind of stuff, it just made everything 10 times worse. That was absolutely a nightmare, a complete nightmare.
So now that you've recovered, is getting back to normal really getting back to normal?
115%. I am like the exact same person I was before, the same fucks. These are my hands. I am in my body. Like, this is who I am. It's 100% true and it's real, you guys.
Hey everyone, I'm Shaun O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Riley Pereira, 21 years old, based in Flagstaff, Arizona, USA. Riley's experience with Depersonalization Derealization Disorder developed after a prolonged period of extreme burnout, juggling 2 jobs with very early mornings and late nights, playing soccer and studying full-time, all at the same time. That constant pressure pushed her nervous system into fight or flight, leading to a frightening breakdown in how her body and mind felt. Her symptoms included consistent panic attacks and her body no longer feeling like it was her own. Riley's DPDR lasted for about 7 months in total. At the time, it genuinely felt as though this might last forever, but once she gained a clear understanding of what was actually happening in her nervous system, the recovery process began. Riley recently wrote to me and said, I thought this was going to last the rest of my life, and now I'm happy to say that it's completely gone. I went back to college, forgot about DPDR entirely, and got back to living my life. I'd love to share my experience to help everyone, especially people my own age, to understand that this is temporary. And today, Riley is here with us to share her experience, the burnout, the fear, the recovery process, and what life feels like on the other side. Riley, you're very welcome to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Riley, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I am 21 years old. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I lived there for about 13 years. I moved to Phoenix about 8 years ago, and now I am up at NAU for school. I am a barista. I played soccer for about, I'd say, since I was probably 4. Took a break this year just to focus on school, and I have the hope of becoming an exercise physiologist at school.
That was a very good description of your life so far. So you started in Washington, went to Phoenix, and now you're in Flagstaff, is it?
Yes.
What serious change of climate there?
Big time. Yeah. So it was going from constant rain, probably about like 40 degrees to 115 in the summer. So that's awesome.
Wow. So how long have you been in Arizona?
I've been in Arizona for about 8 years, and then this is my first semester up at Flagstaff, but I'm a junior. So I did community college soccer, and then I actually was in Cal State Fullerton my freshman year of college. So I've been bouncing around a lot, but
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's really impressive. Great to be able to see so many different parts of the country at such a young age as well, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So Riley, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
Yeah, so I remember the exact date. I was February 28th of this past year. I was going up snowboarding. I was working 2 jobs at the time. So I was a barista in the morning, and then I worked at a sushi restaurant at night. And so I worked really, really early morning shifts, like 3:30 a.m. early until about like 10, whatever. And then I would do soccer, and then I would do school, and then I would come back and I would work a closing shift at the sushi restaurant. So that happened to be the case for that day. I was doing a closing shift, and then the next morning I was going to go up to Flagstaff, which I happen to be now. So it was a 2 hour drive. I got off about like 10:30, went to sleep around like 12, and then woke up at like 6, drove up to Flagstaff, had a fun day snowboarding, and then I'm driving home and I kind of feel like this panicky. I've had panic attacks before in the past, but I felt like this really panicky kind of just like strong sense of just panic, urge of just like what is happening right now. And then in this like a split second, like it just felt like everything just kind of glazed over. And I'm just like looking into something that's just completely 2D and just doesn't feel like life to me. It was looking through like a fishbowl or just something that just wasn't real. And so I remember calling my mom and I was like, "Hey, like something's happening." Because I had an instance actually before this, probably like 2 months ago. Same thing. I was really, really burned out. I wasn't sleeping, and I was driving home, and I had like the craziest panic attack where I almost passed out at the wheel. So I had to pull over, call the police, call 911, whatever, and then I went to the emergency room. They ran tests, and nothing was wrong, obviously, because it was a panic attack, which I found out later. Back to what I was saying about the present, or like during that second panic attack, I called my mom and I was like, "Hey, like I think I'm having another panic attack, but this time it feels different." And so she's just like, "Okay, like just stay on the phone with me while I drive home." So I had like 20 minutes left in my drive. I made it home. I remember opening the door and just looking at my parents. They were going to like some work dinner or something, and they just didn't look like my parents. And I think that was like one of the most scariest experiences where I was just like, "Who are these people? And where are my parents? And why don't they look like them?" So that was very frightening, but I think that was the very beginning of it. And then it ended up lasting obviously up in for like 7 months. But that was just like the first couple of days I was like, literally, what is going on? So
So you had some experience with panic and anxiety prior to that, Riley,
yeah,
but it wasn't maybe it wasn't as bad, but the symptoms didn't feel as disturbing as they had felt this time around. Is that correct?
correct. Yeah, they felt different. It was more like a constricting kind of feeling. Like I would know when I would be like anxious or whatever. It was kind of more just like my heart would hurt, like my chest would just like tighten up or whatever. And I was like, okay, that's like anxiety. But this was more like my surroundings don't feel real. My heart rate is like through the roof for no reason. And I wasn't even doing anything to like, set it off. I was just driving home and I was like, okay, this is strange. So, yeah.
When you say I wasn't doing anything to set it off, it's such a good description. The the scariest thing about a panic attack is that it seems to be happening for no reason.
Mhm.
Like if you had, I mean, God forbid, but if you had been in a traffic accident at that moment or been in a near miss or something, you had the same feeling, you probably wouldn't even have engaged with it. It's just because it's happening there's a physical reason for it happening. But when it just kind of occurs when you're just driving the car and you're perfectly safe, that's when it feels like was something, this must be coming from inside of me.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you start catastrophizing about that. Um, so what was the rest of that day like? Were you speaking to your parents, or did you go to the hospital, or did you what happened after that?
Yeah, so my parents ended up going to the work dinner, or my mom did, and then my dad ended up going to drop something off at like the post office. And so we were supposed to play, I played co-ed softball on occasion with my dad. So it's just like an adult league, whatever. It's really fun. And so you're supposed to go do that later in the night. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try to take a nap, sleep it off. Maybe I'll be fine. And then my dad leaves to go to the post office, and I remember trying to like lay down in my room and just like put on I know there's like this thing on your iPhone where you can put on like dark noise or like the background noise. So I try to do that to just like calm myself down and like what is happening. And at first I thought I was like dehydrated or something like of this sort that was just weird, or I was getting sick or whatever. And then I just remember like my dad coming back up the stairs after he got back like an hour later, and I'm just crying like profusely because I'm like, I don't know what is happening. Like none of this is right. And then so my dad just ended up staying up there with me, and then we just didn't end up going to softball, and it was more just like trying to figure out what was going on and then just calming down. And they were like, okay, it'll be better tomorrow, whatever. And we just kind of left it. So then my mom ended up getting home, checking in on me and all that stuff. But it was a very rough night. I'll just say that.
Yeah, right. And the thing is saying like it'll be better tomorrow as well. I mean, I distinctly remember saying that to myself and
Yes.
thinking like this is okay, this is pretty bad, like, but like I'll sleep it off.
Right,
There's
right.
not there's nothing this there's nothing can't be slept off, right?
Yes.
So you go to sleep. The sleep wasn't great, and then I woke up the next morning, and the first thing I did was check to see was it
It was
still
there.
there,
Yep.
and it was still there. So what was that next morning like for you?
Disappointment is the one thing I can think of, was very just waking up and I'm like, okay, definitely it felt like a bad hangover, so it was more just like I woke up and I'm like, why is this still here? It should have been gone in the night. And then it kind of just sent me in this more spiral, like what's happening, what's going on, all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, bad hangover. That's a very good description of what it is. Um, Again, a bad hangover, but there's no reason for it to be there. So
Mhm.
when we start to catastrophize, so what? So tell me about the rest of the that next day, Riley. Were you keeping your parents informed of what was happening? Were you supposed to be at work? What was that like?
Yeah, so I ended up calling out of work, which I ended up, and like I say like a week later, I ended up going on a leave of absence because it was that bad. So I took probably like 2 months away from work and was just at home doing nothing, which was definitely my fault. But and obviously I didn't know what was going on, so I was kind of just like, okay, like whatever. I'm just gonna play it by ear and see how this goes. Um, but yeah, so the next couple of days was fine. And then I remember because like the first 2 days was, I think that was probably like the worst of it, where it was just absolutely like, it felt like it was my own like little world where I just like, no one could hear me, no one could see me, no one could, connect with me on these kind of emotions. And I remember coming out of it, I remember I was helping my dad upstairs put like these little string lights outside in our backyard because we had people coming over. And I was like helping him screw the bulbs in. And then I like look around and I wasn't thinking about it. And I'm like, this doesn't look how it used to look, you know? And then it looked very different and I was like kind of back to normal. And then I'd say I think I had a coffee. And that's what really set me back into it. I think it was the caffeine and the lack of sleep that played a factor. Now I know that, but literally, and then I kind of just felt myself going back into it, and I was like, "Oh my God, here we go again." But it's like that kind of gave me like a little bit of hope because I was like, "Okay, I just came out of it. I can, and I'm fine. Like, there's nothing happened." But it definitely was scary to go back into it and then last another like 6 months, which I didn't know at the time, but it was more just like, okay, it's my fault. I thought about it. I brought it up. I kept doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. Well. So it was ended up being my fault, but it's like I didn't know at the time, and things like that can just trigger it or make it worse. So yeah, but the next couple days after that, it didn't go back to as bad as it was where everything just didn't look real. It just kind of stayed foggy and like my hands just didn't look like my hands. It was more like the physical kind of like stuff like that and just more anxiety, panic attacks kind of thing. But it didn't look like the 2D world that I experienced for like 2 days because that was absolutely a nightmare, a complete nightmare.
The thing of drinking coffee as well. This was something that I did as well, and I because I felt like I was dreaming or in a dream state, so I felt like I needed to wake myself up.
Mhm.
And I felt exhausted as well. So I said, well, what do I do when I'm in that state? I drink coffee. So I started drinking loads and loads of coffee to try and wake myself up at the beginning of an anxiety based condition. And it just made things like, immeasurably worse.
Mhm.
And the thing is that like yeah, when I look back on it, when I realized what it was, I look back and I was like, God, that was a very silly thing to do. But also at the time, it was the best explanation that I had. And this is the
Right.
thing, it's just about being kind of compassionate with yourself. And when you look back on this and say, well, at each stage of this, we make the decisions we make with the best information that we have. And that at the time, the best information I had was, well, I feel groggy because I haven't slept properly and maybe I'm half asleep. So I'll drink loads of coffee to wake myself up, but I also went through a period of time after I understood what it was, where I said that to myself as well as this is my own fault. Like, I brought this upon myself. I made it worse and now I'm stuck with it. But it's just this massive, massive, we were talking about Goodwill Hunting right before the interview started. So to quote Goodwill Hunting, it's not your fault. It's it's not your fault, right? And I had to kind of drill that into myself as well to say like this is no more my fault than if I got like hay fever. I mean, there's circumstances that led up to it, but I mean, what do I do? Do I just like not be a human being in the world? Like, and and also panic conditions or anxiety based conditions are the most common thing in the world. Um, but and the way you described it as well, right? You were saying feeling like I was in my own little world such a great way to describe it. That people can't quite hear me, and it's like the feeling as well that like what you're going through is so profoundly strange that like even verbalizing it feels like it's hitting a wall because I mean I was scared to describe what I was going through because I was like, this isn't something that a sane person would say. This is like no sane person would say, I feel like I'm literally stuck in a bubble, like, or I'm behind a pane of glass. Like that can't be right. So I was
Right.
afraid to say it. So you stopped working.
Hmm.
You were home with your parents, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So what did that time look like, Riley? So for a lot of people, what they do is that, and I did this too. I dove into researching the condition. Is that what you did? Did you seek out doctors or therapists?
Yes. So I did both of those things. The reason I found out what this was, there is a song by Phoebe Bridgers and it's called That Funny Feeling. And I remember probably like 3 years ago. Um
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you. This is
No, you're good.
that funny feeling, but it's a cover of, oh God, who
Oh, Burnham?
Bo Burnham from Inside. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And sorry, I interrupted you. It's
You're
your
fine,
story.
you're fine.
Go ahead.
You know what's funny is they're dating right now. This is completely up to.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
Go Bo.
Right? Okay, so there's this song by her called Funny Feeling, and you go through the lyrics, it's like a really depressing song, but there's this one part that says, Googling derealization, hating what you find. And I thought about that like 3 years ago, and I found that, and I was like, okay, like, what does that mean? And so I remember looking it up vaguely, like years ago, and then thinking about what was happening to me. I remember, like, wait a second, I've seen this before. And I Googled that up again and I was like, oh my God, I had just looked this up. Well, not just, but like I had recently looked this up like a couple of years ago. And so that kind of showed me what it was. And I was like, okay, so I definitely agree with, I hate what I found when I was Googling my stuff because it was like, you never know when you're going to get out of it, all this kind of stuff. And also, worst enemy was Google, I think. That was like probably the research was just loophole after Reddit, after terrible thing that just made me like, okay, this is just going to get worse. It made my anxiety 10 times worse. But after coming along that, we were like, okay, I probably should get a therapist, probably should talk about this and like figure this all out. I'm not new to therapy. I've had a therapist in the past for anxiety, depression, but it was never like, you know, I had one for probably about like 2.5 years and then ended up just being like, okay, I think I can kind of take a break right now. Um, and then I ended up getting a new one and this was so bad. I'd say this was probably like the second week of meeting her and dealing with this stuff. So she knew what I was going through. So it wasn't like she was just like, oh, like you're just anxious. So like because I've seen other people on here who have had that bad kind of therapy reaction where they're like, okay, you just need to sleep it off. You just need to go for a walk or whatever. And it's like she actually understood like she's seen this in other patients. And I was like, okay, great. Um, the problem is I was like, I said, this is my fault because, a therapist is supposed to take action based on insinuations or whatever. I said, if this continues, I don't want to be here anymore. It wasn't in the sense of like a suicidal ideation. It was more just I was trying to speak my thoughts. That led her to put me into a mental facility for 5 days. And that was absolutely horrible because, mind you, I'm going through the depersonalization. This is like 3 weeks into it. So I'm still very high strung. I'm surrounded by all these people that are more like trying to get off of drugs or try to, schizophrenic and stuff like this. And it just made my anxiety through the absolute roof. And so I understand she was looking out for me and she was trying to make things better. But when I was there, it was just like, I feel like that made it 10 times worse because it was just like, I'm so anxious about my surroundings. I don't know what's going on. I don't know these people. I'm not at home. I don't know where I'm at. So that made it absolutely 10 times worse. But then I came back and then I was like, okay, how are we going to fix this? I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to whatever. So it was really, I mean, I probably shouldn't have stopped talking to her, but I didn't go to a couple of sessions after that because I was just like Because at first, like the first session she saw me after was like, I'm sorry I had to do that. You're worrying me. Like depersonalization is like derealization is one of the things you can just get in your head about. And I just didn't want you to do anything. And I was like, I understand, but I probably should have worded it different because that's not what I was intending. Whatever. It was fine. But I didn't see her after that. And I haven't for a minute just because of the fact, like, I was trying to work through it myself. And you know, it's not a shame to reach out to people, but I feel like in that sense, if I worded something different, she would have sent me back. That's kind of how it felt, where I was like, this is something that I feel like I can talk to my family about, my sisters, like whatever. And it was more like I have my internal kind of support system that I feel like I should probably try to use instead. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of what happened right after that, which was unfortunate, but
Yeah, that is very unfortunate. I've heard people describe situations like that before where it's almost like jumping to the safest possible thing to do, which is, well, better put them into a mental facility.
absolutely.
But when what you're experiencing is basically an anxiety, and it's in the same league as a panic attack, it can be very unhelpful, and especially to be surrounded with people who have like much more serious things like going on. The thing you said as well, Riley, of like wording it like, was it, if this continues, I don't want to be here, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I remember having that feeling too, and I remember describing it to someone in a more recent interview, saying like that it wasn't that I wanted to die,
Mm-hmm.
but it was that I just desperately wanted a bit of peace.
Yes,
I wanted the volume to be turned down
absolutely.
at any cost, because it was just relentless. It was just like being in a roller coaster and stuck, and it's not, it never slows down. Even when you're asleep, it doesn't slow it down. Maybe you wake up and you're still on the roller coaster, yeah, showering on the roller coaster, writing emails. It's just, it's a nightmare. But it is that thing of like, you know, being, it's understanding it from a medical health point of view. They are just being as careful as they possibly can be. But this is also one of the frustrations with the condition not being as widely known as it should be.
Right.
Um, because if you were describing, agoraphobia to that same professional, then the conclusion that they would jump to, if you had said something like, well, if this keeps going, I don't want to be here, is that like, okay, well, but agoraphobia is temporary, it's harmless, and you'll be okay. And that's a catastrophic conclusion.
Right.
But without that context of saying, well, I know what this is, we know what this is, they are kind of covering their bases, which I understand, but
Yeah.
my goodness, in that situation is, Jesus, man, that's the last thing you want, is to right?
Exactly. Because when I got there and I was talking to other like doctors about it and I was explaining, and they were just kind of like, I don't understand what that is. Because my therapist herself, she understood, and I know that she was just taking it for, what it was and just being like, okay, I want you to be safe and whatever. Like, I understand what you have. But then going to the actual facility and telling these people about it, telling the main doctor prescribing like medication, and he was just like, um, I don't really know what that is. I've heard of it, but I don't really know because I was like, when is this going to go away? And he was like, well, I'm not quite sure. And that just made it 10 times worse. Also, like just being in the facility and then just like him not knowing when it was going to go away, me interpreting that as like, oh, I'm going to be stuck with this forever, like that kind of thing. That was just like, it all added up. And I understand that she was just trying to like look out for me, but it was just in a like unfortunate way. But I think like looking back at it, I'm like not mad. It was more just like, I'm grateful, kind of, in a sense, like in a strange sense, where I'm just like, I know she was coming from a place of love and just care and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that I was in the right, area to be. So,
100%. And it's something that I always try to keep in mind, because I had very frustrating experiences with doctors, and I've spoken to countless people, and it can be easy to interpret that as being like, well, they didn't care enough, or they didn't maybe ask the right questions. But ultimately, most of the time, it is coming from a lack of information on their
Mhm.
part,
Right.
and but also wanting to make the best, most careful decision for you.
Right.
So it is being consistent with the Hippocratic oath, like, it is, as you said, coming from a place of love. It's just coming from a place of love without all the right information. Unfortunately, love
Right.
information. Yeah. So what was that whole time like for you and your parents, Riley? Because I imagine just being told that, Riley needs to go into a medical facility for a couple of days, at like seemingly out of nowhere, must have been difficult for all of you.
Yeah. I'd say more so for my mom. I remember her or my dad picking me up and him telling me, like, your mom's been in a mess, like she's been a wreck, whatever. And I understand completely. And it just made me kind of feel like I wasn't guilty, but it was more just like I felt bad for making them worry so much about what was happening. Um, but yeah, I called them like every night. It was just very difficult to, you know, be away from them, especially dealing with what I'm dealing with. Because I live on my own. So I'm like, it's fine to be on my own, but it's like when I'm in that kind of a situation dealing with what was going on in my head, I think that's what worried my mom so much, is because I tried to explain it to both of my parents in a way. I remember first sitting down and being like, look, I don't feel real. You guys don't look right. Something is terribly wrong with me. And I just remember both of them were like, okay. Like, I just didn't want them to think I was like, hey, I sound very strange. Like, I sound crazy. And I just want you to understand, like, this is like a real thing. Like, I'm going to, the first couple of days when I forgot, like, I didn't know what it was or whatever, I was like trying to grasp at words. And I was just like, I'm going to find out what this is called so I can show you I'm not insane. It was more just like me proving to them, like, look, like this is a real thing, whatever. And then so I ended up finding like there's this one Reddit post that I found where it just like described this girl, and she did like the feedback and the loop and all this kind of stuff. And I remember sending it to both of them, to my sisters, because I was like, look, if I just seem off, this is why. Like, here's what I'm dealing with. And so I think back to the whole being in that facility was more just like my mom was worried, like she knew exactly what I was going through. So she was now kind of like, okay, that's like crazy to go through and also be away from home and be in this crazy environment where I'm just like, well, not crazy environment. That was poor choice of words, but I said at this different environment where I'm like away from home, all that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of difficult, I know, for them, but like being back with them, it was better. It was just still like it didn't help, obviously, being away, because it just made it worse. So I was kind of just trying to get myself back to square one, or not square one, but necessarily back to the better part feeling, like, where I wasn't just like felt like I was in my own world, but back to how I was feeling before I went in. So
Can we go back to Phoebe Bridgers for a minute? So just some clear on the time. So you had heard that song
yes,
before any of this happened, and you looked up the words derealization,
yes,
and you went
yes,
and you made a mental note. Well, that's interesting. And then
yes,
some time later, it hit you, and then you subsequently made the connection that this is what she was talking about. Is that right?
yes. Yes, because I do remember, like, I'm a very word kind of person. I was literally showing this to my dad last week. I have a list of words that I really like in my phone, and it's just words that I find very interesting, or words that just like, oh my gosh, that's a great definition. And so I didn't have that word in there, thank God, because that would have been contradictory. But it was more just the fact that I had like I just always need to know what stuff means. And so I remember like listening to the song and I like looked it up, and it's just like, okay, like very strangely. And then just, yeah, it just popped up again. And I was like, well, terrible timing for it to pop up. But like, I guess I'm glad I know what it is and I've heard it before. So it wasn't just like I'm grasping at straws here, like I had kind of like a not background, but like sort of past information, I guess, on it.
Brilliant. It's like, I mean, and also it's still wild that like you get that word from Phoebe Bridgers' cover of a Bo Burnham song, and you kind of have more awareness of it than a lot of people in the medical community. And I mean, it is changing. I will say it is changing more slowly than it should be. But then, like like Bob Burnham mentioning that word, because I remember watching that in lockdown, and I was
Yes.
like, you know, I mean, because I mean, I talk about it all the time, but like most, you could go like months without ever hearing those words, depersonalization,
Exactly.
derealization. And then it's
Right.
in like the most watched thing globally on Netflix. And
Right.
then, and the searches for it spiked after that,
Mhm.
which is amazing to see. But I think that it's like mentions of it like that in popular culture, and then like Phoebe Bridgers being like one of the biggest artists in the world,
Mhm.
covering that song, it puts it into the bloodstream, so to speak. Like
Mhm.
it makes people aware of it. Like and I think, and then people discuss it on TikTok and they discuss it on social media, um, which then kind of like, which then will lead to people going into their doctors and saying like, "This is what I have. This is the thing, right?"
Yeah.
And then the doctor will look it up, and then that kind of through osmosis goes out into the medical world. So I think there's a nice relationship between people becoming aware of it on their own terms, and then and doctors finding out about it too, and then
Exactly.
hopefully we'll get to a place soon where anybody will walk into their doctor's office, describe the symptoms without naming it.
Mhm.
The doctor saying like, that's what it is, and here's a Phoebe
Exactly.
Bridgers song about it.
While you're at it.
Yeah, it's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, because I think
um,
if I were just, like I found out what it was and knew that there was nothing to worry about, I think I would have just pushed it under the rug and been like,
yeah,
okay, let's continue what I was doing. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you have This is a big thing with like cognitive behavioral therapy, is like putting labels on things
mhm.
to understand them. And once you do understand them, that starts to take the power away from them. It doesn't
Right.
switch them off immediately, but it takes the kind of the mystery, the sense that there's like, this is some kind of bizarre, ethereal, like tropical thing, like that
Right.
you'll never quite understand. And then it's like, oh no, this is what it's called. Like
Right.
it's actually really common. Like, and yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And in fact, most people will experience this briefly at some point in their lives. It's perfectly normal.
Right.
Yeah. So, can you talk about some of the symptoms you experienced, Riley? You mentioned a few of these in passing, but can you maybe give us a more kind of comprehensive walkthrough of the symptoms you experienced in this time?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest couple were definitely like the physical, like I would look at my hands and it just felt like they were attached to like somebody else. Like it, which is a really weird feeling because I I remember saying that to my mom, and that was the one thing where she was like, "Okay, what is going on?" Because I was like, "My hands don't look like my hands." And she's like, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" And I was like, "Well, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. They just don't look like my hands." And so that was just like a very like strange feeling. And also I remember looking in the mirror and just like my reflection didn't look right. I was like, that doesn't look like me. Um, but as I was slowly, this is like later on, but as I was slowly coming back, I feel like the depersonalization faded faster than the derealization. Cause like I looked in the mirror again and I was like, oh, that's me. I look normal. But that's later on. But anyways, it was more the physical symptoms of like my just hands and just me just didn't look right. And then I would say probably like I said earlier, the panic attacks were really bad. I tried to get in the car like a week after everything happened and stuff still didn't feel real. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I made it 5 minutes down the street, started crying, turned around and went home because I was like, I can't do this. And that was really scary because I was like, what's happening? I can't, like I can't even get in my car and drive. I was not as outgoing. I feel like I'm a pretty outgoing person and I felt like I couldn't go out in public. I just felt like going in there, everybody knows what's going on and they're all looking at me and all this stuff or whatever. And it was just very like, where's my personality? I have no emotions. I felt like I felt like a genuine robot where it was just like cut off from every emotion and I was just there living life and I'm like, how do people do this? It was kind of set me back and like, what is the point? All this kind of stuff, which led to like the suicidal ideation kind of things where I was thinking like this is not, it just put very, very bad thoughts into my head. Um, which I feel like is horrible, obviously, to deal with that. But then on top of like the depersonalization, derealization kind of stuff, it just made everything 10 times worse. And then I'd say very foggy kind of my like thoughts, like my memories didn't feel like mine. Like I would be thinking about something and I'd be like, did that happen to me or did that happen to the phantom that has my hands apparently? So it was more just like what's happening, all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
how long did it take you to find the explanation of what this was? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say maybe like 2 weeks, probably, maybe a week. Probably a week. Because after I found the song and found out what like that was, I was like, okay, let's do some research. So I looked it up and I found a bunch of posts that scared the absolute crap out of me because I was just like, wow, this doesn't look very promising. But I'd say like probably a week. And then after I found that one big Reddit post, I was like reading through her symptoms and I was like, okay, that's just about everything I have and then some. So that was very comforting to know that I'm like, okay, this is a real thing. Here's proof, whatever, all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah. Did you? Yeah, no. So like saying, saying to your mom like my hands don't feel like my hands, and
mhm.
uh, it's the way I always like to think of it is that those phrases sound scary, but you know if you look at any anxiety based condition, mm, outside of the context of having the correct label on it. So if you were to describe like claustrophobia, for example, outside of the context of understanding it correctly, you would say it would be like, well, I get into my car, I close the door, and I start crying. And I feel like I'm going to be crushed. It's not happening. I know it's not happening. There's no evidence for this happening, but I'm absolutely haunted by this thought that that something's going to hit me or it's going to crush me or somehow, right?
Right.
Now, if you've never heard of the word claustrophobia, or if you're not familiar with anxiety disorders, describing that on its own terms is going to sound very, very strange.
Mhm.
But when you do understand it and again put the label on it, it gives it a context and a way of understanding it. But it's the same thing with this. I mean, I remember just saying things like, I feel like my memory is fragmenting. I feel like my perception of time has been damaged. And then jumping to the conclusion that I must have dementia, that I was schizophrenic, that I had developed multiple personality disorder. The memory thing as well. Are these my memories? Are they the
Mhm.
memories of another person? Looking at old photographs of myself and being like, nah, I do not know who that dude is. Like,
Right.
yeah, that guy's off traveling on the other side of the world. Like, I can't go outside. Like, I can't go to the
Right.
bathroom without
Right.
having a 45-minute panic attack. Um, yeah, yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing to go through. And then after you discovered the name of it on Reddit, really, did
Mhm.
you then kind of go into that? Did you kind of go down the rabbit hole of researching consistently after that? Because I know you said you encountered some posts that were pretty scary. Did that get you to pull back from them, or what was that like?
I'd say yes and no. I say yes, it definitely caused me to pull back because I was like, okay, I should probably stop looking at this stuff. It's scaring me. No, just because I wanted to keep looking and find the one positive story that would be like, okay, this is your motivation. You can do it. But it's like the problem is like people are only going to, I feel like a lot of people on Reddit, especially, share stories that are just bad. Like you have to go through a lot of bad to find the one good story. And it's like there's so many good ones out there, but the reason people don't share them is because they don't care because they're cured from it. There's no reason to go back and talk about it if you don't, it's gone. It's not something you think about anyway. So it's just the fact that it's all the people that are still dealing with it and struggling are just leaving. I'm still dealing with it. 3.5 years later, here I am, like all this stuff. And it's like, of course, because you're coming back, you're reminding yourself, like you said, with the cognitive behavioral therapy. I did a little bit of that with the therapist I was talking about and like just trying to get myself like she'd be like, okay, once you start thinking about it, you have to acknowledge that you're thinking about it, focus your attention onto something else, continue about your day, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how it felt with like the Reddit post. It's like, okay, I'm searching for all these bad stories. It's like there's no good story. So why am I still searching? I should have just left it alone. And I think that kind of came to fruition like maybe a month or two in where I was just like, okay, even keeping like the good story up. And then I would always like continue to scroll through the comments when I shouldn't have, because I would just be like, all these people are just like, oh, like I'm still not healed. Like, thanks a lot for nothing, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, like that's not helping. So after like 2 months, I was like, we're done. No more Reddit, no more looking at this stuff. It's not helping me. No matter how scary everybody says it is, like we're just gonna ride the wave and see where it goes. So
it's like an emergent property of the Reddit forums that
Mhm.
the the vast majority of the people on it are people who are in the middle of struggling with the condition, because the vast swathes of people who have recovered, because you always can, are not on it, because at some point through trial and error or through consciously moving away from it, which what sounds like you did, really, um, is that you do take a step away from it, because you realize that discussing these symptoms all the time and comparing and contrasting them, it's not helping. Maybe it felt like it did at the start,
Right.
but at some point you realize, consciously or unconsciously, that you're just scratching an itch and it's not helping it to heal. What was your lowest point in the whole experience, Riley? Is there a particular time that sticks with you?
There definitely is. So my sister graduated from CU Boulder in May. We live in Arizona, so I had to get on a plane in the middle of all this. And I remember this is when I first started emailing you. I was like, "Hey, this was like hours before my flight. I was like, I have to get on a plane. I am absolutely like terrified. I don't know what to do, blah blah blah." And then I remember you're just like, "Hey, like it's going to be a natural, just get on the plane. You're going to be fine. Like nothing is going to happen to you." And I was like, "Okay, great." I remember sitting downstairs on my staircase with my suitcase next to me and my mom trying to get me in the car. And I'm just sitting there profusely crying because I'm like, I'm not getting on that plane. I can't even look in front of me without freaking out. Like I still didn't, like my hands still didn't look like my hands. And I was like, how am I going to get on a plane and navigate through security and all this stuff? Like, that's just not going to happen. And so I remember just absolutely like sobbing. And so I was on medication at the time. I was taking like a escitalopram, so it's like an antidepressant and then like an anxiety medication. And then my psychiatrist had also given me this hydroxyzine. So it was like this kind of like panic attack medication, which was great, but I feel like it didn't help me during this whole process of derealization because I was feeling so much that it just couldn't tamper it down. But I remember what my mom did is she gave me like the max dosage I could have for that day. And then sleepy time tea. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it is like a herbal remedy tea that just like knocks you out. She put 4 of those tea bags in one coffee like cup container, made me take the hydroxyzine. I got in the car and I'm just like crying the whole way there. I'm like, I can't do it. I need somebody to pick me up. And then all of a sudden, it just like a switch flipped and I just went silent. Like I was just exhausted. I almost fell asleep. Like my mom was like, I thought you were gonna fall asleep before we got through security. So I mean that ended up going okay. Then I get in the plane. So we're sitting in the plane and I'm just like, okay, like I just was like so anxious. I'm like gripping like the seats and I'm like, we haven't even taken off yet. And I'm like knuckling that and it's like just turning white and it was terrible. And I remember going on to the manual. It has like the little sound, like the audios that you can listen to. And I was remember there was the one where it was like the calming one where you're like, you're fine, nothing's gonna happen. And I just remember having that on repeat as I'm in the sky because I'm like, I can't look out the window right now. I can't process that. I can't process this is happening. So I just closed my eyes, I put it on, I turned my headphones all the way up, and I just completely zoned out and it was completely fine. So I just remember that being like the absolute worst is like the drive to the airport, getting on the plane, and then once I figured out, okay, like let's use some tools that I have to try to get myself through this. So
Using tools to get through this was a big thing for me as well with getting on a plane, because I had like a terrible experience on a plane. I had to go to a wedding in Scotland, flying from Ireland to Scotland and back, and this was like very soon into when it first happened. I didn't know what was going on, and I was just like, how in the name of God am I going to go to an airport? Like, I can't go to the toilet. Like, this is just a nightmare, right? Um, and made it through it. But the whole time I was on the plane, I was like, I was just like gripping the seat and like staring in front of me and just hoping to get through it, and then having panic attacks because of that.
right.
And when I was recovering, what I realized was that like I needed to do what I had always done when I was traveling. So if I'm on a flight, if I'm on a train or whatever, it's not like when I'm not anxious, I'm sitting there like grabbing the seat, like, you know, staring at the seat in front of me and trying not to panic. Like, I'm
Right.
listening to podcasts, I'm watching TV shows,
Mhm.
I'm reading a book, I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm doing something else, like, it's the it's the thing of saying it's getting away from the mindset that says, oh, I can't do this or I can't look outside the window. There's things I can and can't do. It's just saying, no, what do I normally do? So, what you're describing there, and what I came to realize is it is that, like, we use the tools that we have to get back to the normal habits that we have in these situations, because flying in and of itself is not actually frightening. It's extremely safe, like being in an airport. Okay, it's stressful, but it's not dangerous, but it is. um we do build up these very, very strong connections of, like, there are things that I can do and things that I cannot do. um and going to an airport for me for a long time after that was something I couldn't do. Have you flown since, Riley?
Yeah, actually, I just got back from California this past week, but before that, literally after we got back from my sister's graduation, 2 weeks later, we ended up going to Europe,
No.
which was, yeah, it was awesome. Don't get me wrong, but oh my God, this was still when I was dealing with everything. So I was just like, what is happening? We did like Spain, Ibiza, Italy, Rome, like all this stuff. And it was just like the flight to get there, the layover in Germany, just like everything. I think that was probably like the worst thing I could have done. But like looking back at it, I am so grateful because I had so much stuff I was doing that I was not focused on it at all. I think it was more just like the thought of like, oh my God, I have to get on a plane again. But I was like, if I could do it once, what's another, 13-hour flight? Like I can do this. So I mean, it was fine. It ended up being fine. It was,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Half an hour, 13 hours,
yeah.
Spain, like.
Yeah, I was like, 2 hours is fine. I can do a whole 13 hours. So
it's like it's like exposure therapy on fast forward.
yeah, it was like, you have no choice. You're getting on that point.
Yeah.
Oh. It sucks, love you, because it's like this trip was planned for so long because my sister had graduated, so this was her graduation trip. It's like, okay, we're gonna go to Italy, and I'm like, okay, I gotta buckle down. I gotta be an adult about this, and we're gonna go. So it ended up being perfectly fine. I had a couple moments here and there where I was just like, all right, let's take a deep breath. Like you're fine, whatever. Like I remember there was like it's just because it's so crowded and there was a lot going on that it just kind of made me like tense up and just kind of freak out. But I remember after I was like, I'm so like, I think halfway into the trip is when I started finally just kind of like letting everything go. And I was just like, okay, like, let's focus on the trip. Let's focus on the experiences, whatever. But I just ended up getting back from California literally like 3 days ago to go visit my friend for her 21st birthday. No problems. Absolutely none. Because I was like, that was my first time being on a plane since, um, Italy, and I had no issues at all. And I was fine by myself and everything. Because before I was with my parents and my sisters, and I was like, okay, this is fine. But like this time I didn't even think about it. I went to the airport, I went through security, and I was like, oh, I literally had made that connection like 2 days ago. I was like, hey, wait, that was my first time going to the airport since everything happened, and perfectly fine. No issues at all. So,
For me, when I started traveling again, I thought that, like, it would be this kind of series of obstacles of, like, I need to just, I need to white knuckle my way through the flight there, white knuckle my way through the whole holiday, and then white knuckle my way back. And then you kind of realize that, like, well, especially if you're kind of on a holiday where you're being active, like, you just get distracted and you get consistently distracted. And then
mhm.
something might happen where, like, maybe you miss a connection, like, or something goes wrong or something like that. And you just have to kind of, like, get yourself together to sort it out, which always happens on traveling at some point.
It happened. Yep, it did.
Yeah. But you take the spotlight of your attention that you've been focusing so intensely on these thoughts and feelings of anxiety, and
Mhm.
now you have to focus on the fact that you've misplaced the ticket for the day tour to that cool place you wanted to go to, and, oh Jesus, where's it gone? Like, and suddenly that's what you're doing, and it's almost like when your brain says, okay, no, we'll get back to not feeling like my hands are mine, but I have to find these tickets, like, um it's it's so interesting how how anxiety gets deprioritized when you just do stuff that's more interesting,
Mhm.
and you realize that the only reason that it's felt so intense is because you were. I like to think of it as like you're when you focus on these thoughts, they're just words.
Mhm.
They're just feelings, they're just images. But when we focus on them, it's like we plug them in. It's like we charge them, and
Right.
they gain a charge regardless of the content of them. And then we go traveling or we do something else, or you know, I don't know, watch a movie or read a book. You're unplugging that and you're plugging in something else.
Mhm.
And all of the effort that you thought would have to go into like deconstructing these thoughts and kind of unpacking them, it's just like no, you just unplug them and plug in something else, and you just stop caring about these thoughts because you've defined the
Exactly.
ticket. You know,
That's exactly how it felt, where it was just so preoccupied and so focused with something else that I was like, I put it on the back burner almost, where I was just like, we're gonna not think about it. And I didn't think about it. But there'd be times where I'd be sitting and I'm like, hey, I'm not thinking about it. Let's think about it again. And I'm like, no, let's not do that. Like, let's go find something else to do.
isn't it? I've been thinking about this a lot recently as well, about just the whole thing of when you literally interrupt your thoughts and you say no, oh no, we're not doing that.
Mhm.
And I remember I used to do that myself, like where
Yeah.
I would I would get back into like I would start thinking again about like the nature of consciousness, or like the size of the universe, like
Right.
while I was like watching, I'd be watching a movie, like I'd be watching like a Pixar movie, and I'd start
Yeah.
thinking about like the nature of consciousness, and I would
Right.
actually just stop myself and go, oh no no, oh no no, oh we're not doing that anymore. We're watching Monsters Inc. Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
yeah, we're sorry, we're not doing that anymore. We're doing this now.
Yeah.
And it's just that kind of, and it seems like, and I know there's going to be people watching this who think like, do not insult me with that simplicity. Like, I'm not a child, right? But the thing is that the complexity that we think is there is only because of this like narrative that we've put around it. And
Mhm.
when and it is a simple to, I mean, it's obviously you that there's more to it than that, and you
Right.
train yourself out of it. But when you're interrupting a pattern and you're just saying no, I'm not doing that. Okay, so I mean, because if I want to, I can sit here and have another like 30-minute think about this the size of the universe that I know would get me nowhere except
Right.
feeling anxious and panicky. Or I can watch this movie, and but like
Exactly.
just pointing the spotlight, just going, no, we're doing this, and it drifts back over. You go, no, we're doing this over and over, and it just tells your brain these thoughts and feelings, no matter how compelling or how frightening they've seemed, they're not important. They're simply not important. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what it took me, was just more like, that's why it took so long, in my opinion, for me to come back, is just more the habit. Get in the habit of getting yourself back to where you were. And it's like your brain doesn't just form a habit overnight, it takes time. And so, like, once I started realizing, hey, this is what I have to do, I just kind of was like, okay, relax, keep going, doing what you're doing. And then eventually it'll sort itself out. And it did. So I was like, okay, great, awesome, works out.
Yeah. So speaking of which, Riley, um, can you talk about your recovery and how did it start and what did it feel like? Because I know this is something that people often ask about. What does the actual, because when you're in it, the idea of recovering feels impossible. It's like it's a different planet.
Right.
So what did the recovery process feel like for you?
Yeah. So I remember when I ended up going back to work was April. So I was like, okay, I need to start. Because after doing some research, going down the rabbit holes, whatever, I remember people were like, you just need to go and do stuff. You need to distract yourself. You need to put yourself out there, whatever. And I was like, okay, great. So it was April. I went back to work, and I remember the first time I was gonna go was the night before, and I couldn't do it. I called in. I was like, "Hey, I'm not gonna be there. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm sick." Because I only told my manager what was going on. I was like, "Hey, I'm having some really difficult mental health problems." But the person that answered the phone wasn't my manager, so I kept it brief. I was like, "I'm sick. I'm not gonna make it today. Whatever." And then the next day I was like, okay, I'm gonna text her and I'm like, hey, I think I need more time. And then I was thinking about it that day, like, so later in the day, I text her in the morning. Later in the day, I text her at night, and I'm like, okay, I'm coming in. I'm gonna come in, and I'm gonna do it. And so I had talked to my dad. My dad had brought something up, and I am so grateful for this because I don't think if he did this, I don't think I would have gone back into work that day. Because I was telling him how nervous I was and like how anxious and all this stuff. And he was like, okay, well, I can just come sit in there and have a coffee while you're working. And I was like, oh, okay, because I forget, like I'm a barista, so I can just sit there and he can have a coffee and I can just make my coffee and whatever. And so it ended up working out perfectly. So I show up, he comes in 5 minutes after, and he's over there sitting at a table. So anytime I felt like a little freaked out, I could like look over and I'm like, okay, wait, there's a person I know. And so that really helped me kind of just be like, okay, look, this is normal. You know what you're doing. You've done this for so long. Like this is fine. And so I think that's what I would recommend for everybody dealing with this is like if there's like a loophole or like a way to make yourself as comfortable as possible doing the things that you love or doing, a job, take it because that is what genuinely got me back to doing stuff. Like if he didn't offer that, if he didn't suggest, hey, like I'll just sit in there for a day and we'll just see how it goes. He's like, if you don't need me anymore, come over and tell me, hey, you can go, all this stuff. And it was just like, it was just so reassuring. Like I would take my break and then I was just like, he's over there. He's sitting right there. If anything goes wrong. And then I started having these thoughts that like later, like the next shift when he wasn't there, I was like, so what if something goes wrong? I'm surrounded by a bunch of people. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? Like I fall on the floor, I pass out, okay. I'm gonna get help. Like there's people here. So it's like it was one of those things where I kind of just connected the dots and I'm like, just because my dad's in that corner doesn't mean like there's not people right next to me. So that kind of ended up sending me on the right track of just like, okay, like there's people around me. I'm not dealing with this by myself. I'm not alone. As alone as it felt in my brain, it was more just like there's so many people around me. So just focus my attention to the outside instead of the internal thought that I'm fighting in my brain, which is what I ended up doing is just I went to the gym. I started, you know, the gym used to be like a great place for me to go and I would try to go and I was like I can't do this. There was like the first time I went, I remember I walked in there, I was on the stairmaster for 10 minutes and I walked right out. I was like that's enough for today. And honestly it was fine because you just got to build your like your confidence level and your security kind of back up, which is fine. It just felt very foreign. It felt like I was like learning a new language almost, kind of just getting myself back to how I was. And it was very frustrating. I'll say there were definitely days where I'm like, this is going nowhere. This is stupid. Nothing's helping. Like all this stuff isn't helping me, whatever. And then I was like, okay, I know in the long run, like you have to give it time and stuff isn't just going to change overnight. So ultimately, I think that's what recovery felt like. It felt like I wasn't recovering, which is probably not what people want to hear, but that's what it felt like. I'd say like maybe like a week or two of just consistently doing stuff and then you would get into habits and then the more habits you build the less you think about it and that's kind of what started happening. And so that's when I'd say like that's when you can feel the recovery is because you're like wait a minute, I went this long without thinking about it. And that's kind of how I started measuring it. When I would think about it, I wouldn't be like okay, we're going to think about it for this long and then we're going to stop because that's not how that works. You're obviously going to think about it, but it was more like okay, I went 6 hours without thinking about it. And then the next day I was like, oh my gosh, 8 hours went by. I didn't think about it. And then it was like 2 days and then it was like weeks and then it was like months. And then here I am. I forgot completely about it. So I say that's what it is. It's more like, it's not going to just be like, oh, I woke up, I'm better. It's more, I didn't think about it. I don't remember what it feels like. I'm so invested in life in front of me that I'm not paying attention to what's happening, the internal battle in my mind because it's basically rewiring your brain. You got to rewire your brain to get back to you know how you were before and you're going to be the exact same the way you were before. It's just there's not possible for you to completely change who you are. It's just more you're having a little blip. That's what I like to call it. It's like a little blip. It's just a moment in time where stuff doesn't feel right, but it ultimately obviously passes. And I think my biggest key that helped was just going and seeing friends if it didn't feel real, going to eat lunch outside if it didn't feel real, going to do stuff if I didn't feel real, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go, like I said, to the gym. I'm going to go get lunch with my sister, like all this stuff where I'm like, okay, I don't feel right, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I think that's what started making my body just be like, okay, wait, we're going on all these places we used to go and nothing's happening. And that's ultimately what led to the feeling of like, okay, we're good. And so I think it's one of those things you have to push yourself to do these things that are so terrifying that just feels impossible, like getting on the plane, going to Europe, like all these things. I'm like, I can't do this. But it's like you do it and you're like, nothing happened. So like, where's the consequence? Like it's only going to benefit you in the end.
It is, again, it's exposure therapy. You
Truly.
have to, there's no, there is, I mean, you can do positive reinforcement with the brain. You can, you know, kind of support yourself in a verbal sense. but ultimately you have to show your brain that it is safe to do these things, and then
Absolutely.
not, and then nothing bad is going to happen. And also, and then you were saying, I used to say, but what if I go to the cafe and I have a panic attack, right? And I would have to say to myself, well, okay, but if you have a panic attack, what happens? Like, you have a panic attack. I've had panic attacks before. Panic attack never killed somebody. It
Nope.
never drove anybody crazy. They're deeply, deeply uncomfortable, but also, so what? Like, so what? And I would, you are having a kind of a stoic approach to it and saying, like bring it on. It's this, like, do your worst, and also saying, like, this is, I really, really think this is like one of the keys to kind of changing any habit or any kind of mode of thought, is to accept that the feeling that you don't want, or the emotion that you want, is there for the time being.
Mhm.
Stop trying to interact with it in any sense, but allow it to be there. And it feels deeply counterintuitive to do that, especially when the thought feels like an emergency, when the thought is saying, but you're going to go crazy, but you're going to die. And you say, like, you don't even reply to it and say, I'm not going to go crazy, I'm not going to die. You just say, like, cool, I've stuff to do, like, I've coffee to make, I'm a barista,
Exactly.
right? I'm like, you can, if you want to come to Europe with me, like, grand, like, but I'm going to Europe, like, I'm not missing this flight, and just, but accepting that it's there for the moment, doing the thing that you were going to do anyway, and thereby demonstrating to your brain that the anxiety that you felt coming up to it doesn't need to be there. It
Right.
doesn't need to be there. But you have to show, you have to demonstrate this to the brain over and over. And this is why it's so important to, live your life as if you felt no anxiety. You kind of have to bulldoze your way through these things a bit, and just be like, I'm going to the cinema. Like, if I
Mhm.
if I've if I have a panic attack at the cinema, like, fine, I am still going to, I'm still going to Monsters Inc. you know, like,
Yeah.
nothing is going to stop me from doing this. Um,
Right.
that's really great about your dad as well. It sounds like he's been really supportive. I think that, and it is important. I'm very lucky as well to have very supportive parents. They were great with me at the time as well.
Yeah.
Um, and as you said, as as alone as this can make you feel, you like, but I am surrounded by people.
Yeah.
And also, I always like to, I think of it like this, like, the nature of anxiety is catastrophizing,
Right.
and catastrophizing is, it feels isolating. So when we go through DPDR first, or any anxiety based condition, it feels completely isolating, because it feels like nobody has ever gone through this before. Or even if they have, they've never gone through it as bad as this before. Even if you're, even if you have, like, a series of panic attacks, every panic attack feels like this is the worst one. Like, the other ones were bad, but this is the worst one. So even your own panic attack feels like an isolated event that's worse than all the other ones.
Exactly.
It creates a sense of isolation. But the irony of it is, and the beauty of it is, that it is the opposite. Like, 1 in 3 people will develop an anxiety-based condition at some point in their lives. Like, these things they're the most common things in the world. And I always say to people, if you go through life without experiencing a panic attack, you need to do the lottery. Like, these are actually, like, the most common, like, almost just about everyone will have some experience with intense anxiety and panic at some point in their lives. It is the opposite of isolation. But it's hard to remember that when you're going through it, especially at first. But again, this is the beauty of putting labels on these things and saying, this is actually extremely common. It's absolutely temporary. I probably know people who've gone through this before. Um, and it is the opposite of isolation. And the thing you mentioned as well, Riley, about, I went not determining, but, like, noticing in your recovery that, like, oh, I went X amount of time without thinking about it. And I hate that as well. And I always refer to it as a good way of thinking about recovery is that like is that like it's not like you'll be monitoring it during the day and going, okay, yeah, I feel 40% better. Okay, now it's 42%. Great. Like, it's not that. It's at the end of the day, after like having worked your ass off all day and gone to soccer and hung out with your friends, you at the end of the day you say to yourself like, I completely forgot to feel anxious today. I had so much on. There was so many things happening that I literally forgot. And now I am thinking about it. So I'll just, play a game on my phone or put on a podcast, or I'll actively focus the spotlight away from it again.
Hmm.
But it is that I like to describe it as like the windows of time in which you're not experiencing this get bigger and bigger, and they go from minutes to hours to days and then to months, where you're just like, this is now in the past, and I can't. It's not that I don't understand it, or I can't remember it, but like I just can't relate to it anymore because I'm not in a fight or flight state, and I'm not looking at the world and my experiences through a filter of anxiety any longer.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Um, how was the DP manual helpful in your recovery, Riley?
I would say the first time completely reading through it and then just being like, okay, this is what's going on. Like after reading the Reddit, I was like, okay, like this is just like some, you know, helpful tips, whatever. But then going through it, breaking down what it really is, I think helped the most was just kind of just breaking it down like, you're going to feel this way. It's fine. You're going to feel, but it was just more like the reassurance. I feel like that followed everything was just like, okay, this is completely normal. You're going to feel like this for a little bit. Here's the symptoms. And then I started referring to it instead of like Google. So instead of Googling stuff, I'd be like, okay, why do I feel like this? And then I would go in there and look because then it's like, there's no comments. There's nothing for me. There's no next video. There's nothing for me to click on. So I'm going to be like stuck in this rabbit hole. So I'm like, this is your one thing. This is the only thing you can look at. That's it. And so that's what I told myself. I was like, no more Google, no more YouTube, no more none of that stuff. And then, like I said, with the audios, I would listen to those on my way to work, on my way to the gym. If I was like freaking out while I'm driving, I'm like, okay, we're just going to put this on, deep breath. And it would just walk me through like, calm yourself down, like, take a deep breath. And like the ones I would listen to also before going to sleep was the one like the counting backwards one. And it's just like, that helps me just not think about it. I would just focus on my breathing. And I feel like that was probably the most beneficial was definitely like the audios and like just reading through it and referring to it as what it was and, not overcomplicating it. Because I feel like if I were to go and search it up on Google, it would just be like, okay, well, then here's all these things. Like, is it going to last my whole life? I'm like, why am I looking at these questions? Like, that's not the question I have. My question is like, why do I feel so jittery right now? Like all this stuff is like, okay, just like look that up in the manual. It'll be there. So that's what I ended up using it for, which I feel like is much better than using Google and Reddit and all those search engines. So
Yeah, yeah, that's great, and it is, and you're absolutely right. I designed it to be like sandboxed, so this you can go in and you just basically kind of roam around it, and it contains all the information that you need, and it's not going to start suggesting questions to you that you don't need in that moment, like, or
right.
and this is, I mean, it is. I do think it's in general, it's a very, very positive thing that people can type the symptoms into Google and have them pop up, because back in 2005 that was not the case. Uh, but also at some point you have to pull yourself back from it, as we were saying earlier, and because you can find infinite variation of symptoms to compare and contrast and questions to ask, and you may get some sense of comfort from them, and getting from replies from people, but it just keeps going. And any like qualified medical health professional relate or working in the field of anxiety will say the same thing, that you have to stop asking the questions at some point, because the questions are just scratching an itch. It's a habit of thought.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I wanted to ask you, Riley, as well, because this happened initially while you were driving.
Mhm.
Was driving in particular an issue for you, and how was that in your recovery?
I mean, I wouldn't say like it specifically was as difficult because I know there's a lot of people that like it happens in the car and then they just have like this really they can't get back in the car. I tried to get in the car a week later and I was like, okay, today's not the day. I'll try again later. I love driving. I'm a big road trip person. I love being in the car. I love driving my friends everywhere. If someone's like, who wants to drive? I'm like, me, I'll drive. So I was like, I'm not letting this ruin the driving experience for me. So I'd say yes. Think it was definitely very difficult to just, I don't know, first get in the car initially, and then I started making people go with me. So whether it was my mom or my dad, I'd be like, can we go to the store? Like, I just want to go test it out. I want to walk around. I want to see if I can do this. And so they'd sit in the passenger seat. I feel like the one thing that really helped me in the car, if that's what whoever's watching this deals with the car, is the air. I turned the air full blast and they kept me very focused because I was like, wow, it's freezing, but I need to lock in and focus on the road. So I think that's the one thing that really helped me was just turn the air on. And I always like having my car cold, but this was like blasting and like right in my face where I was like, okay, like you're here, you're present, you're driving a car, like you got this. And so I think that's what helped is just like the practice, like you said, like the exposure therapy, where it's like put yourself where you don't want to be and then suffer through it, but nothing's going to happen to you. Like I would always be like, I'm going to get in a car accident, I'm going to lose control of the car, like something bad's going to happen. And it's like, okay, no, that's not going to happen. Like you're very aware, you just feel far off. So I think the more I did it, the less scared and more comfortable I ended up getting with it.
Nice. So get in the car, blow freezing cold air in your face.
Or just air in general, but it helped.
And you the hair going back like yeah, my version of that was like just to put on music at full blast.
Mhm.
I would put on like Nirvana or Guns N' Roses and just like
That
absolutely and like sing along to it too. So you're
yes.
just like I mean I can either be like panicking that I'm going to lose control of the car, or I can be like shouting along to "Welcome to the Jungle," you know.
Your own short road concert.
Yeah, yeah. People pulling up beside you like, "He's what's the crack in the car?" Like, Yes. Also, Riley, I wanted to ask as well about the therapist. Have you? Because I know you pull back from meeting them, but like, have you had you interaction with them in the meantime, or maybe kind of spoken to them about the experience in retrospect?
I actually haven't, and I've been really sitting on this because I feel like I need to update her on this whole thing because I think my thing when she first had this whole situation, when she first met me, I walk in her office, I'm just crying profusely. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, all this. And if she could see my mindset and my mental state right now, she would be absolutely blown away. So I feel like I definitely need to schedule something with her just to like kind of keep her in check. Cause I'm sure she's kind of like, where did that girl go? Like she, was kind of angry with me. I wonder where she went. So I should check in with her probably. But yeah, I feel like because I started making progress, I think, after the fact that I got back from like the facility. Um, I just think it was more like I was starting to connect the dots on my own, and so I was like, okay. I felt like I told my mom this. This is the reason I think I ended up like stopping for the time being was because I'm like every time I see her, I talk about it. Every time I see her, I bring it up again, and it's like, okay, I need to stop doing that. And that is the main reason. I forgot to mention that earlier, but that is the main reason I stopped seeing her because I was like I'm not dealing with depression right now, like, besides like the effects that came with the derealization because I was just so in the dumps because I'm like, what's going on? But I wasn't seeing her for anything else but trying to get me out of my head. And I'm like, okay, well, if I come back to her and she's like, so did you think about it? I'm like, well, I'm thinking about it right now. Like that didn't help me. So I was like, okay, let's put that to the side. I'll come back and revisit later. So like now the fact that I completely stopped thinking about it because I was seeing her every week and I was like, every week I'm bringing it up again. I'm like, I'm trying to forget about this. I'm not trying to sit on it and be like, oh yeah, like I'm actually doing so much better this week or like this is what went wrong. And it's like, then I'm over analyzing it again. And then we're back where we started. So I was like, okay, let's put it off. So I think I definitely will be sending her a little text and being like, "Hey, remember me?" So,
You should drive up to her office with the air blowing your hair back, like.
you're no hopes up.
Yeah, it's really interesting, but the because the that idea of like that type of therapy where you are constantly kind of unpacking something, which I think kind of comes from the a Freudian approach, but it is actually extremely useful for certain things, especially like significant kind of like trauma in the past or stuff from childhood or whatever, and it can be extremely useful. But for anxiety-based conditions, um, I feel like it kind of hits a wall quite quickly because ultimately with anxiety, these are symptoms, right? So like the feeling of depersonalization and derealization, as compelling and as narrativized as it feels, like the narrativization just comes from trying to make sense of it. But ultimately, like the feeling of disconnection from yourself and the world around you is um it's part of your fight or flight response, and it's in the same category as heart palpitations and muscle tension. It's the mental
Right.
equivalent of your pupils dilating, right? It's sweating and shaking, right? And it's like if you were experiencing like heart palpitations and muscle tension, like would it be worth your while to go into therapy each week and discuss like, well, have you been experiencing heart palpitations this week? Let's talk about the heart palpitations. What were your heart palpitations like on Tuesday? Because now you're focusing back on them again. And I feel like, and again, I'm absolutely not, I'm not a medical health professional or whatever claim to be, but I feel like that type of therapy, which can be extraordinarily useful in some contexts, when it gets pointed at this, it's not helpful, and often can cause it to just be focused on a lot more. And it's also contrary to like a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, which is much more about kind of like, what can we do right now to reduce these symptoms and start training yourself away from it, as opposed to kind of like unpacking it each week and discussing the ins and outs of it, which can be done with the best of intentions, but can inadvertently keep it going, I feel.
Absolutely. And that's what I would say, because she definitely took me on the cognitive behavioral therapy path. Um, but then it was just kind of like every day she's like, okay, so how do you feel right now? And then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm taking that as like how do I feel? Then I have to like look and be like, okay, well, I don't really feel that real right now. So I think that's what kind of helped, or like didn't help. But like after she like kind of showed me like this is what you should do. This is cognitive behavioral therapy. This is what you can do on your own. She gave me like this little pamphlet and everything. And so it's like if I needed to figure out what I need to do, this is what I referred to. So I'm like, in a sense, that is what genuinely like that was her specialty. And that's what helped me because I was like, okay, then I'm going to just not visit because I feel like every time, like I said, I would just associate therapy with the depersonalization kind of thing where I'm like, okay, I should stop thinking about it like that. So, she's just checking up on me. She's seeing what we can do. Like, how am I doing now? And so I think that was ultimately, like you said, it just unpacking other things like, childhood trauma or past things that you can't, move from, like attachment issues, trust issues, all that kind of stuff. Like that's a great, I've had experience with stuff like that. So I loved that kind of approach. But it's like for this, like you said, it just didn't help in that sense where I was just like, okay, well, I don't want to think about it right now. So like, let's not talk about it. And then there's nothing else to talk about because that's the big issue. So it just didn't end up working in my favor. But yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with meditation as well, where I had been meditating like for years before I developed it, and I've been doing so since, like, but I I really tried to use meditation as a way uh to stop the anxiety. And for all I mean, ostensibly that seems like it's a fantastic approach, because like what better way to calm your mind down than by sitting down and focusing on your mind. But in the
Right.
case of this, like as you said, Riley, I just felt like I was back in my head when I was doing it, and I tried to force it for a while. And I was like, no, that like meditation always calms me down. It always makes me feel better. This has to work. And then when it didn't work, I that made me kind of feel even more panicky. But ultimately, I had to set it aside. So even though it's so useful for so many reasons, I had to put it aside until I was out of my head enough that I could kind of go at it without of a context of anxiety. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. We have these, and also, but what also is interesting though is that I've spoken to people in the meantime who have said that they have found meditation to be extremely helpful, and
Mhm.
that they can use as a grounding technique. So, I'm different strokes for different folks, I guess. So Riley, uh, a question that everybody asks. and I always ask on these interviews is this. So now that you've recovered,
Mhm.
is getting back to normal really getting back to normal?
115%. I am like the exact same person I was before, the same thoughts. These are my hands. I am in my body. Like, this is who I am is 100% true. It's real, yes.
I think these are my hands.
These are my hands.
It's
I think
like
that was the
it's
thing.
it's like ID, like, you know.
Yeah.
Are those really?
And really quick on your meditation point, I'd say meditation didn't help me for a very long time, but there is a couple apps that I had found that very, very useful. There's this one that I use, it's called Balance. And I think when it's somebody talking and walking you through like a nature scene, that helped me extremely. When it's the traditional meditation, like you said, where you're trying to reflect and like calm yourself, that did not help me because, like you said, I was in my head. But it's like if you use like the app or something like that, I feel like that kind of just walks you through. And I use it before I go to sleep now. It kind of helps put me to sleep where it's just like it'll start doing like the counting backwards or it'll start taking deep breaths. And I feel like that makes me more clear headed in general. So I feel like that, back to your point, is very, very helpful.
Great to have recommendations like that as well. So Riley, I got one more question for you. There's
Yes.
going to be people watching this video who may have gone through something very, very similar to what you went through. I remember, as I mentioned at the top of the interview, when you emailed me, you said, I want to let people, I want to let everybody know, but especially people around my own age, that this is something as scary as it is, that you can get through it. So, with all that said, what advice would you have for people going through DPDR?
I would say that you have to treat every day like it's normal. Like what I was saying earlier, you have to push yourself to do things that you're uncomfortable with doing because that's the only way you're going to heal. You can only heal from stuff that you're going to do because I would always be like, okay, well, I'm going to go to bed. I'll wake up. It'll be gone the next day. That's not, obviously, that didn't work because I was stuck with it for another couple months. It was just like, you have to be the one that's willing to make the change. And I think once I sat down and I started making those habits and I started pushing myself to do things that I don't want to do, it helped because especially being my age and it's like this is like the year or like the years I'm supposed to be like doing stuff. I'm supposed to be in college. I'm supposed to be enjoying things with friends. And it's like then my whole life went on pause and it's like, okay, well, what can I do to unpause it? I have to unpause it. I have to put myself out there. I have to go to work. I have to go do my hobbies. And then it's like all of a sudden, like puzzle pieces start kind of aligning and then I feel back to myself. So
That's excellent advice. Um, Riley, thank you so much for being with us on the channel today. I've enjoyed talking to you so much, and you've got a great attitude about the whole thing, and you've got a great way of talking about it as well. I know there's going to be people out there who watch this and find it extremely useful and inspirational. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and
thank you.
keep up the good work, and enjoy life after recovery.
Thank you so much.